Howdy, Taylor Marshall here. We've had a lot of great requests in the forums. If you haven't participated in the forums yet, you're really missing out because there's a lot of neat things going on there. And one of the things that members are doing are requesting topics and things they'd like to see featured in the new St. Thomas Institute over time. One member named Tammy asked if this month in December we could go over the painless birth of Mary. It's a very controversial topic in contemporary theology, and it's one of my favorite topics as well. I thought it would be a great follow-up to our video on the Immaculate Conception because, of course, it relates to the Immaculate Conception. But first, I want to talk about a movie that comes out on TV every year in December around Christmas time. It's called The Nativity Story, and I'm not a fan of this movie. I'm not. That's why I'm bringing it up. And the reason I'm not a fan of The Nativity Story is two reasons. You may have seen this on DVD. It also appears on public broadcast every year. It's the story of the birth of Jesus. It goes from the Annunciation, the Visitation, all the way up through the birth of Christ with Mary and Joseph going to Bethlehem. The two reasons why I don't like this movie, in fact, I would even, I'll go ahead and say it. There's sacrilegious elements in it. The chief of which is Our Lady and St. Joseph are moving through a market in the movie, and a fortune teller comes up, and he grabs the Blessed Virgin Mary, and the fortune teller reads her palm. And from the movie, it seems that Our Lady goes along with this and consents to it. The problem with that is that palm reading and fortune telling in the Bible is a major no-no, mortal sin, very bad, contrary to the first commandment of the Ten Commandments. So here in the movie, we would have Our Lady being depicted as engaging in the sin of divination. Not good. The second reason why I don't like the movie and why it's not accurate is in the scene where she's giving birth to the Christ child, she's really in a lot of pain and huffing and puffing, and that again is contrary to the historic tradition that Our Lady's birth of Christ was painless, and in fact that her virginity remained intact before the birth of Christ, during the birth of Christ, and after the birth of Christ. So we're going to look at that topic today. Tammy asked about it, and there's some other people who were interested in it as well. I've blogged about it before on taylormarshall.com, and I wanted to go a little bit deeper on the topic today. The Catechism of the Council of Trent, also known as the Roman Catechism, this is in the 1500s, says that the birth of Christ, and this is quoting many of the church fathers, was like light passing through glass. So the birth of Jesus Christ when he was a baby was a miraculous birth. It was not like the births that all of us experienced when we came into this world. It was a miraculous birth. We don't know all the details about it. The church doesn't go into the anatomy of it, but it was like light passing through glass. There's a very beautiful account of it by Catherine Emmerich, and also my favorite one is the account given by the mystic Maria Agreda. If you have a chance to look at those, especially as we move closer to Christmas, they're very beautiful and touching mystical accounts or visions of this reality. Now, some people are worried when we talk this way about the infant Christ that somehow we're robbing him of his humanity or denying that he was truly a little baby. And that's not the case at all. We know from the Gospels that Christ's physicality was, in a sense, miraculous. We see him walking on water. I've tried it, doesn't work. You sink to the bottom, right? When he rose from the dead, he passed through the stone before it was rolled back. So his body passed through the rock in his resurrected body. So the physical limitations that we have do not necessarily apply to Christ because he's the Son of God. He is fully God and fully man. Of course, he also does numerous miracles throughout his entire life. So the birth of Christ is also one of these miraculous moments. Now, there are many doctors of the church. I think the last count is 35. I may have that wrong. And none of them deny the painless birth of Christ from the Blessed Virgin Mary. 20 of them, to be exact, affirm that the birth of Christ was painless, peaceful, mystical, and serene there at the cave in Bethlehem 2013 years ago. Now, there are a few scriptural verses that also indicate this, and they come from the Old Testament. They are prophecies of the birth of Christ. The first one is one you probably know. We hear it every December in church. It's Isaiah chapter 7, verse 14, and it reads, "Therefore the Lord himself shall give you a sign. Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel." The virgin both conceives as a virgin and gives birth as a virgin. The second Bible verse, which is really a slam dunk, it's really the best one, is also from Isaiah, but it's from the last chapter. It's from chapter 66 in the prophet Isaiah, and it goes like this, quote, "Before she travailed, she brought forth. Before her pain came, she was delivered of a man-child." Isaiah chapter 66, verse 7. So before any pain came, she delivered. This birth was miraculous. It was special. It was unique. And this really harkens back to the video course before this one, which was on the Immaculate Conception of Mary. Remember, when Adam and Eve sinned, original sin was brought into the world. All of us who are born into this world are born with original sin and concupiscence, which is the tendency towards sin, right? This is why we struggle throughout our whole lives with temptations. The Blessed Virgin Mary, as we learned in the previous course, was exempt from original sin. Now, if you'll remember, the punishment for original sin for women in Genesis chapter 3 was the pains of childbirth. For the men, it was the work hard at the sweat of their brow. That was the punishment for the men. For the women, it was the pain of childbirth. So it only makes sense. If Our Lady was without original sin by a miracle through the Immaculate Conception, then the punishment of original sin, which is pain in childbirth, would be exempt. So Our Lady did not have those pains. The next verse in the Old Testament about Our Lady's painless childbirth comes from the prophet Ezekiel. The church fathers, especially the ones in the East, well, in the West as well, love this verse. It's Ezekiel chapter 44, verses 1 through 3, and it's talking about the temple of God, where God's presence dwells. "Then he brought me back the way of the gate of the outward sanctuary, and looked towards the east, and it was shut. Then the Lord said to me, This gate shall be shut, it shall not be opened, and no man shall enter in by it, because the Lord, the God of Israel, have entered in by it. Therefore it shall be shut." So this is a little bit obscure. Let's explain it. So there's this temple, it's a vision, and there's a gate facing to the east, right? Which the east always symbolizes the presence of God in the Bible, because that's where the sun comes up. There's this gate, and it says no man can enter into that gate, and the door should always remain shut. Why? Because that's the door that the Lord enters through. And what the church fathers did is they applied this to the Blessed Virgin Mary as the temple of God, and that God's presence dwells in her, that is, the infant Jesus, and that gate, of course, is her womb, and it remains shut because the Lord passes through it mystically. Also, the Song of Songs, Canticles 4:12, it says, "A garden enclosed is my sister, my spouse, a spring shut up, a fountain sealed." Okay? And this is all referring to the doctrine of the virginity of the Blessed Virgin Mary. The fathers teach that she was a virgin before the birth of Christ, during the birth of Christ, and after the birth of Christ. And they actually hold that her integrity, her physical integrity of her anatomy, was virginal through it all. All right? So there was no break, no bleeding, no destruction, no disintegration of the Blessed Virgin's womb. Now, I'm going to go through many of the church father quotes here, and we're going to put all the quotes below so you have access to them because they are very valuable. And the first one is from St. Gregory of Nyssa. Quote, "Though coming in the form of man, yet not in everything, is he subject to the laws of man's nature. For all his being, born of a woman, tells of his human nature. Virginity, becoming capable of childbirth, betokens something above a man. Of him, then, his mother's burden was light, the birth immaculate, the delivery without pain." That's St. Gregory of Nyssa, writing in 388. St. Ambrose of Milan, one of my favorite saints, writes, "His birth did not break the seals of virginity. He came forth of the Virgin without the loss of her womb's intactness." St. Augustine says, quote, "It is not right that he who came to heal corruption should by his advent violate her integrity." And then also on his sermon for Christmas, St. Augustine says, "In conceiving thou wast all pure, in giving birth thou wast without pain." We'll do just a couple more. There's dozens here, dozens of quotes from the early church. St. Leo the Great, also a doctor of the church, "Mary brought him forth without the loss of virginity, even as she conceived him without its loss." And final one, St. John of Damascene, one of my favorite saints, one of Thomas Aquinas' favorite saints. He's often quoting St. John of Damascus. And he says, quote, "His birth was painless. It was above the laws of generation. For as pleasure did not precede it, nor did pain follow it. According to the prophet who says," and here he quotes Isaiah 66, which we just covered, "Before she travailed, she brought forth. And again, before her pain came, she was delivered." And we'll close, of course, with St. Thomas Aquinas. He covers this question in the third part, question 35, article 6, and he affirms explicitly that her birth was without pain. He says, "The pains of childbirth are caused by the infant opening the passage of the womb. Now it has been said that Christ came forth from the closed womb of his mother, and consequently without opening the passage. Consequently, there was no pain in that birth, as neither was there any corruption. On the contrary, there was much joy therein that the God-man was born into the world, according to Isaiah. Like the lily it shall bud forth and blossom, and shall rejoice with joy and praise." The magisterial document that you want to go to for this is the Roman Catechism. I mentioned it earlier. And there again it says explicitly that the birth was without pain, and that Christ entered into the world through her womb as light passes through glass. Well, I hope that was helpful. I hope you can see that it relates to the Immaculate Conception of Mary. She had no original sin, therefore she had no pain. And then secondly, that the Church Fathers affirm it, and they do so by appealing to sacred Scripture. So, Tammy, thank you for the great question in the forum. And if you have questions, please go to the forum and leave a request, and we'll see what we can do. Thanks again for watching, and God bless.